When I'm not playing solitaire, I take a book down from the shelf. And what with programs on the air, I keep pretty much to myself. Mr. Saturday Dance, heard they crowded the floor, couldn't bear it without you, don't get around much anymore.
Vivien Leigh will be forever remembered for the most famous female film role of all time.
She was the biggest star of the biggest film ever made.
I'm not cornered. You'll never corner me, Red Butler, or frighten.
Her affair and 20-year marriage to Laurence Olivier was the most scandalous and glorious love story of its time.
What she had with Olivia was absolute magic, and then it became absolute hell.
I never lied in my heart.
But behind her glamorous success as a film and theatre star, she faced a lifelong battle against mental illness, which ultimately destroyed her.
When she was high, she was very high indeed and almost uncontrollable. When she was low, she was extremely low and almost suicidal.
Liar!
What?
But above all, she was a movie star, par excellence.
Vivien Leigh was born Vivien Mary Hartley in India in 1913, the only child of wealthy British parents.
Vivien had, I suppose, what you could call a very comfortable lifestyle. The family didn't lack money. There were plenty of servants. It was a very highly coloured childhood, and there were plenty of people to pay her attention.
I think that her parents lived quite a good life. They were really based in Calcutta, but like all families, they would go up into the hill stations at certain times of the year. And I think she had a very nice early childhood. She was described as being not a sleepy baby, which is something which went on through life. She was always very awake and very energetic.
Vivien was headstrong and spoilt, and nothing prepared her for the shock of returning to English society.
She was sent over to Roehampton, to a very good Catholic school for girls. But you can imagine the contrast between leaving colourful and pleasurable India and warm India and arriving in bleak, cold Roehampton. I tend to think that that abrupt break may have attributed to it some of the troubles that she later suffered from.
Vivien was nearly 2 years younger than any of the other girls at her convent school, and she didn't see her mother again for nearly 2 years.
She said there were two things for which I will always be grateful. She said I'll be grateful for a lot of things, but she said one was that the Mother Superior taught me always have clean underwear. She said clean underwear was absolutely vital. It was like a religion. And she said the other thing was she knew I was lonely because my mother brought me from India and just went back, and I was left in this school. And in the school holidays, nobody invited her to go away anywhere. She said she was alone in the convent with all the nuns, and the Mother Superior gave her a little kitten, a little cat, and she said, you can take that to bed with you. And she said, I had this little companion.
Vivien's reaction was to draw attention to herself whenever she could, as one of her school friends, fellow actress Maureen O'Sullivan, remembers.
Vivien never changed in looks at all. She was always a beautiful little girl. I remember we used to do silly things in school, like voting for the most popular or the most pretty or the most talented or the most likely to be outstanding in the world. And I remember Vivien Leigh got the vote. Well, Vivien always wanted to be an actress. She was single-minded. She was the only girl in the school to take ballet, for instance. She took it alone. The only one. I thought it was rather brave of her.
In 1927, Vivien's parents returned home to Britain, and together they travelled around Europe in luxury until the money ran out.
Ernest had a big financial setbacks in the crash in the late 20s. So when they came back to England, they retreated to the West Country, to Devon, and lived rather modestly. I do get a sense that she was very keen to move on in life and escape from her family. I mean, she was fond of her family, certainly later on, but the only escape for a girl who wished to get out of her family at a very early age, of course, was marriage.
She saw this handsome young Englishman on a horse in a red coat from one of the hunts, riding through the streets, and he obligingly took his hat off and tipped it to Vivien. She said, "Who's that?" And she was told that was Leigh Holman, a young barrister. And she said, "He looks so handsome, I'm going to marry him." She was told that he was already engaged, and Vivien said, "That doesn't matter, I'll make him my husband."
By 1932, they were married. Vivien may have got her man, but she had no intention of settling down to a quiet domestic married life.
He was a very, very nice man and actually proved to be the mainstay of her life in many, many respects. Very good looking and sort of keen at rowing and all these things. I mean, he would have been somebody that any young girl would have felt was a very reassuring, good potential husband to be.
When they got married and settled down in London, Vivien discovered that domestic life with Leigh rather lacked the romanticism of setting her cap at Leigh and making him her husband. And she prevailed upon her husband to let her go to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art that had been founded only a year before.
She was a high-spirited girl who wanted to do anything. One must never forget, she was devastatingly pretty. She would stand out in a crowd of anybody, and she had friends who were there and the circles that she moved in. So it was the most natural thing in the world to want to go to RADA, which is not quite the same as wanting to act.
Vivien's ambitions had to be put on hold when she fell pregnant, but she was hardly enthusiastic about motherhood.
Maternity really didn't agree with Vivien. She described it as a rather messy business. I'm not going to do that in a hurry again. And she simply entered in her diary, had a baby. Not even had a daughter, or had a daughter called Suzanne, but had a baby. And it must have been a rather disconcerting sign for her husband to realize that his wife's mind really wasn't on establishing a household around him, but on pursuing her career outside the house.
Thanks to my husband Leigh's success as a barrister, I hardly had to miss a moment pursuing my career or my studies at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. We had a nurse and a maid.
American actress Marcy Lafferty performs as Vivien Leigh in a show about her life. Her Vivien character tells her story in an imaginary press conference in 1960.
Of course, I was a fan of Vivien Leigh. I mean, it resulted in a play and a life's work almost. But I think most of all, she was completely inspirational to me on so many levels, as a woman, as someone who just saw all possibility and made it come true.
Vivien appeased her husband by taking his Christian name, Leigh, as her new surname. Her RADA connections brought several minor roles in film and theatre.